This time, we're taking a look at the spoof spectacular Mars attacks. And along the way we ask, what's the problem with birds? Are humans really supposed to be this excited for a first contact scenario? And how did trading cards lead to a big screen film? This is Force Fed Sci-Fi. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Force Fed Sci-Fi podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris Rupp, and I am joined by my friend and co-host,
the Martian Commander, Sean Michael Culp.
And yes, and we are so excited to be talking about our film today, Mars Attacks, a Tim Burton directed spectacular from 1996. And I mean, I gotta say, like, I had so much fun rewatching it for today's episode. I don't know about you, but it just brought up a lot of great memories I had watching this in the 90s.
Oh, I had a lot of fun watching this film too. I believe this was the first time that I had seen this film. So to me, it was all fresh. But that's cool that your parents allowed you to see this in the 90s. Mine did not at all.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before that my parents had sort of some weird rules when it came to content digestion in my childhood. Like, I was able to watch Terminator 2 and Predator, but The Simpsons were a no-go. And somehow Mars Attacks was okay in spite of the many, many red and green skeletons that show up.
Right? The adult humor jokes, like all that stuff. But Simpsons weren't okay. That blows my mind, man.
So anyway, let's provide a brief synopsis of Mars Attacks. So, when Martians arrive on Earth, claiming to come in peace, I'm using that in air quotes there, humanity is surprised to see that they actually want to kill us. And they look to their government and top scientists for hope, and just hope against hope that they are able to save everybody and hopefully bring the Martians in peace.
I think you got it down, man.
And I say hope against hope because I think everybody in this film has an over-reliance on the government and the scientists. Like, oh, they'll make it right. This will all be okay.
Right.
So,
yes.
Let's get into the cast and crew real quick. As we mentioned at the top, this is directed by Tim Burton. And at this point, this was what I would call like peak Tim Burton. He had done so many other movies up to this point. He'd done Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Edward Scissorhands, Batman, Ed Wood. He was a producer on The Nightmare Before Christmas. So this is like peak Tim Burton at the height of his powers in Hollywood.
He could do no wrong.
No, he really couldn't. I mean, his version of Batman, I still think, is one of the best films in the comic book superhero genre. Ed Wood is fantastic. Edward Scissorhands manages to still be entertaining. I mean, the man has a very eclectic, unique, dark style that just appeals to the inner goth in so many people.
Yeah. Are you saying that you're an inner goth, Chris?
I would say everybody has an inner goth kid that lives in them. It's just to what extent is that inner goth kid on display.
All right, fair enough. Some people, they just keep it hidden, buried within. Other people paint the nails black. They do the whole getup, like the Undertaker. All right, Roger.
Yeah, there's some people that dress up as Jack Skellington for Halloween, and then there's some people who watch A Nightmare Before Christmas around Christmas time. That's just how that goes.
I love it. Thank you for clarifying for me.
We've also got an all-star, absolutely loaded cast in this movie. From top to bottom, this is hands down, I would say probably top 5 casts for a film that we've discussed here on the show.
Oh, definitely. That's why I've heard of this film's cast, like particularly, Jack Nicholson, because he plays 2 roles. And that's why I was super pumped to review this movie and watch it, because it's just like the who's who of the 90s.
Yeah, you've got, like you said, Jack Nicholson pulling double duty as President James Dale in Artland. You've got Glenn Close as the First Lady, Annette Bening, Pierce Brosnan. Now, this is only a year removed from his debut as James Bond in GoldenEye, so Pierce Brosnan really hot right now. You've got Danny DeVito, because apparently he and Tim Burton are best friends, and Danny DeVito's in every one of his films. You've got Martin Short, Sarah Jessica Parker, Michael J. Fox, and then you kind of go down into the sort of like nitty gritty sort of bit players sometimes. You've got Rod Steiger, who was an Academy Award winner. Tom Jones just showing up out of nowhere because it's in Vegas and you have to have a Vegas performer in your cast.
Yeah.
You've got football legend Jim Brown, which for some reason I had forgotten that Jim Brown was in this movie, and he is fan-freaking-tastic.
He was so fantastic. And his punch, that was the buildup. I love that in this film.
Yeah, I firmly did not expect Jim Brown to throw down with a CGI Martian, but it was so fun to watch.
Yes. Yes.
We've also got Lucas Haas.
Yes, we do.
Lucas Haas is Richie. Natalie Portman, also in this movie because the 90s were just huge for her. Lisa Marie as the Martian girl, and I found out the only reason she was cast in it because she was Tim Burton's girlfriend at the time. As Sylvia Sidney as Grandma Florence, and this was actually her last film appearance before passing away, but she was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And then rounding out the principal cast, Christina Applegate, Joe Don Baker, Pam Grier, Paul Winfield's in this too, who we talked about when we discussed Terminator. And we've also got Jack Black. Jack Black makes another appearance.
Yeah, a very young Jack Black.
Very young Jack Black, around the same time that Waterworld came out. So Jack Black making his early career as a bit player in 90s science fiction films.
Mm-hmm. Before going off and conquering the world with the band Tenacious D.
Hey, let's not forget School of Rock.
Oh, of course. Put him on the map. All right, so how did this film come to play? Let's talk about some production notes.
Yeah, so this actually, and I didn't know this heading into this. This concept, this Mars Attacks idea, actually began life as a trading card set in the early 60s. And I don't know if you were able to see these trading card images, but man, are they like graphic and like super dark for the time. I was not expecting those cards to be a product of the 1960s.
Yeah, they're pretty rad looking. I mean, super vintage. I would love to have these actually if I could, because they're pretty cool.
Yeah, if any of our listeners have like any, Mars Attacks cards that they want to, part with or give to us as a gift, we would be more than willing to accept that.
Yeah,
because these are just, oh man, these are just so dark and creepy looking. Like I think, like I'm looking at one right now. There's a bifurcated human and a bifurcated dog, a Martian creeping into a woman's sleeping bed, another Martian setting a box full of kittens on fire. These are just, man, these are massively dark.
That's great. I just love like the blood on them too, like how they, oh my god, that Martians look insanely evil and terrible. Like they're terrifying. Much different than the Martians in the movie.
Yeah, I think the violence is definitely toned down in the film. It's definitely more cartoonish and I don't want to say palpable because people are still being, incinerated. But they're just like the darkness of the violence is sort of removed by just saying like, oh, well, there's no blood per se. That's all there's left is just, skeletons.
Right. But it's kind of nuts that in the 60s, this was their depiction of the Martians, like for the time, I guess. Whereas in the 90s, it's like, woo.
Well, yeah, they evolved from being like these gray, big-eyed creatures after the Roswell incident, and now there's these big brain green monsters that just attack everybody. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, it was an easy sort of allegory between a Martian invasion and communists because it's still very much in the height of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. So a lot of fear is kind of being preyed upon by saying, hey, look, don't be afraid of the communists, but be afraid of these aliens.
These things that we know nothing about. I love it.
Yeah. So to the surprise of no one, the cards were not on shelves for very long because, well, they were very violent, and in the early '60s, that was a no go for a lot of people. So there was a district attorney in Connecticut. I don't have his name, but he made some inquiries into the company, and the cards just stopped being sold.
Because it was too violent.
They
Well, I
were
guess
too
it-
violent. I mean, you could not get away with anything that was remotely violent in the early '60s. I mean, even the first James Bond film is like watching a Disney movie compared to today's James Bond or Mission Impossible films.
That is true. Yeah, we are pretty gory and bloody nowadays. Speaking of, I just saw the movie Spiral, and that movie was pretty nuts. So you're right. You're right.
Now everybody wants the blood, they want the violence, and then this in the early '60s was just not gonna fly.
Some trading cards are like, oh, how could you? Get that thing off the streets.
And then it was movies bad, television bad. This is corrupting the minds of our children.
Oh, how we hath changed. But all right, so the cards, they made the movie. He wrote about, he was inspired by the cards and decided, I'm going to make a movie, a satirical film. But wasn't the film darker at first, and then they decided to make it a little bit more campy?
Well, I think from what I found, there were two ideas that were sort of pitched to Tim Burton. One was Mars attacks, and the other was being dinosaurs attacked. But this was also a year after Jurassic Park has been released, and nobody wanted to do a dinosaur flick because it would just be viewed as sort of a knockoff of Jurassic Park. But
Yeah.
Tim Burton came up with the idea to sort of make Mars Attacks this homage or spoof film of a lot of 1950s B movies from the sci-fi genre. So you drew inspiration from Invaders from Mars, It Came from Outer Space, The War of the Worlds, in the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, also Plan 9 from Outer Space. So this is sort of the aesthetic that Tim Burton grew up watching and thought that he could update it or just present it in a new light in the mid-90s.
Well, that's nice. He's paying his dues to the people. Though it is kind of ironic that Independence Day also came out very similar time.
Oh yeah, we will certainly save sort of that goof up towards the end of the show when we talk about Mars Attacks Legacy. But you get if you watch the film and you are reminded of Dr. Strangelove, you're not wrong there, because that aesthetic was intentional by Tim Burton and the production designers.
Oh, okay. They did it all on purpose. Probably.
Absolutely.
That's funny. But it makes sense because it's almost like a disaster film. I think that's what he said. It's kind of like the Poseidon Adventure from 1972, or Towering Inferno. He wanted an all-star cast.
Well, yeah, and that was true of a lot of disaster films, and it's still true now of having this all-star cast that it is any one of those actors would be able to carry a film on their own, but they're all together here in this great grand adventure where things are on fire and things are collapsing and there's explosions everywhere.
Yes. I love it.
But I was also surprised to learn, I mean, if you know anything about Tim Burton, one of his frequent collaborators is composer Danny Elfman, and they actually almost didn't work together on this movie.
Really? Why not?
I guess they had some sort of disagreement on, like, during the making of A Nightmare Before Christmas. And, I mean, that film score is fantastic. There was just some sort of dispute. The specifics aren't really sort of known. That's sort of between Burton and Elfman. But they were able to reconcile
Squash the beef
before making Mars Attacks. And this is one of Danny Elfman's best film scores. There's so much use of the theremin. It's dramatic. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's a perfect, like, there was nobody else who could have made a better score for Mars Attacks than Danny Elfman.
No, and you're right. The score is pretty tremendous, especially when they meet the Martians the first time, or like when the Martians pulled the one over in the Capitol on the senators and start murdering people. I just love the dramatic tension and the buildup. You know, so where they want to be friends or pretend to be friendly, and then right before they just completely eviscerate everyone and murder them.
Yeah, it was a mistake to let the Martians in the Congress building there. But yeah, no, like yeah, I totally echo what you're saying about Danny Elfman. He was his creative talents were put on full display here in this film.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I think.
So I mean, what did you, I mean?
Yeah, go for
but
it.
also being for the mid '90s, I would say the visual effects were pretty impressive at the time.
Oh yeah, this was a very, because I know, he gave it a shot, because this was made 95, and I know Tim Burton wanted to use stop motion animation for the Martians, but then he decided to swap. You know, and it says they had an international team of 70 animators working on it for 8 months to get these Martians involved. And I mean, it looks like it's a 90s film, right? The CGI is dated, but it's also, what, 25 years old? So, not everything can be Jurassic Park. But this stuff, it's great. It's funny. The Martians don't look too hokey. That their crazy dialogue, their voice that you so lovely put out in our intro, which I'm still kind of cheesing over. That's it. All worked out. It's really silly. It's very silly.
Yeah, that Martian, the ack that they just throw out there. That's one of my favorite film sound effects, and they created it in the most just easiest way possible. They just recorded a duck, quacking and played it backwards in the film.
Oh, that's so smart. Keep it simple, right?
Keep it simple, like, I mean, because nobody knows how a Martian would speak, and I think everybody would just assume, like, don't they just go like ack at each other?
Yeah.
So I think Mars Attacks definitely influenced how we think Martians would speak at each other. Wouldn't they just do like ack? I mean, or just say like ET, like phone home.
Right. That's it. And to talk about that, actually, that kind of is why I think this film is it's almost like a satire, parody, like spoof of our culture at the time, because it's funny that when they meet the Martians and they don't really speak English, what? They don't speak English, and they have to have this crazy contraption to translate the dialogue. It's pretty silly. It's he does a great job at poking fun at us, in the United States, or just humans in general, and how we would react to Martians.
Well, yeah, and again, that all comes from Burton's just love of these science fiction B movies, and at the time, everybody was just churning out these science fiction alien invader films. Because they were cheap to make, you could interchange the cast. These were basically like science fiction films and westerns were basically the same thing. You rearrange characters and plots and locations, and boom, you have a science fiction picture on your hands. And I think watching this sort of begs the question: do you think this is a parody film, or is this satire?
Oh, I think this is satire. To me, it's very satirical, making fun of the president of the United States and how he would respond, like Jack Nicholson's inability to make a decision. And I love just how the military, how they portray the general guy. We got to murder everybody. The consumeristic culture of Jack Nicholson, again, in the middle of this crazy invasion, is trying to sell a casino to a bunch of international people, and despite getting like blown apart, Martians, everyone's just going on their day-to-day life, gambling away in Nevada. We don't learn from our past mistakes. The French meet with the Martians. I mean, it's great. It's I think, to me, it was very satirical.
Yeah, I would actually differ, and I would call this. I call it a parody film, like because ultimately, I think satire is supposed to subvert, but I think parody makes it's sort of like a roast. Like you want to make fun of it, but you also don't want to insult it. And I think that's what Mars Attacks does by saying like, "Hey, look, yes, we're making fun of the 1950s alien films, but we're also making fun of government and scientists and just this overwhelming belief that seems to permeate in society that a first contact scenario would go very well." And yeah, and there was just so many other parody films that were coming out in the 90s. Like Austin Powers started releasing in the 90s, and then shortly after that, Scary Movie came out.
Yeah.
But that was sort of like, that was just making fun of horror films and just the cultural zeitgeist at the time. So you see the delineation and the clouding of the lines that we sort of knew that was parody and satire. Like the filmmakers who made the airplane films and Top Secret, like they knew how to make satire, whereas Mel Brooks was somebody who could make parody.
Yes, he could. Yeah, that's okay. I don't mind agreeing to disagree.
Like, and that's okay. That's why we do this show. It's okay to disagree. Art is subjective. It's meant to be subjective.
Amen to that, brother.
So let me ask you this too. I mean, we both agree that this is sort of a spoof film. So what do you think is the key to making a great spoof film?
A great spoof film. I think you need a great spoof cast, writing. I think the humor has to have a good balance where it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it has to have like a good mix where it's not like total silly like fart jokes. It has to have like some cultural relevance to it.
You hit the nail on the head when you said it's important. Like you cannot take a spoof film too seriously. Like it's supposed to be there for fun, for humor, but you do have to strike that balance between tension and humor. And I think it's also important to have a clear vision. Like you can't just do things just for the hell of it. Like in the Scary Movie films, like they spoof, the WhatsApp, commercials. They spoof Budweiser. They spoof Nike. Like you can't just do things just to do them. And
yeah,
and that's the difference between a great spoof film and a mediocre spoof film. Something like what the Scary Movie creators did.
Yeah, and what they still do. Like we saw a lot of spoofs in the 2000s where it was like even like MacGruber and like all these different ones that came out, and some are good, some are bad, but it's all like objective, or subjective.
Yeah, I think the spoof genre I think died after the last Austin Powers movie. It's just I do not see spoof films. I think they're a massive waste of time now. But the whole genre is dead, and I mean, for all I know, there's going to be a next great spoof film that comes out within the next 2 or 3 years. But I think it's a dead genre now.
I'll agree with you there. I definitely do, because like you said, there has to be like a clear vision and a story. I think a good spoof film, like what makes Austin Powers so fantastic, is it's a story. While they spoof things, it doesn't go off the rails so far where you're like, what am I watching? What is the point of this? Where they spend the whole film just spoofing people, but the story makes up 10%. And I think that's the difference between a good one like Austin Powers and, like you said, Scary Movie like 4.
Yeah, the Scary Movie films lost steam after the second one for me, and I just couldn't watch them anymore.
Same. I couldn't either. The second one was what did it for me as well. Let me give you my strong hand.
No, my other hand's not strong enough.
Yes. Oh, that one was pretty good. So check out Scary Movie 1 and 2 if you want a decent pocket of the 90s.
There you go. So let's get back to Mars Attacks here. So one question I want to pose to you is, do you think a first contact scenario roll out like this? Could we be receptive to it? And how exactly do you see the first contact situation going?
I don't see it going well at all. I see if they come here, I don't think so. I think it would be very militaristic and capture, take, study, and research, and it wouldn't be like a peaceful thing. I couldn't see us like meeting with them, whatever aliens come here and, have a dialogue. I don't personally think. No. Now, if it was like something in space where we're on their turf, like we go to Mars and then all of a sudden Martians show up and they're like, and they mess with us. I think space is a little bit different because it's out of our environment. We can't control space. So I think then NASA and everyone would be, Elon Musk would be up to a more peaceful. I still think it would be like a research experiment because it's all grounded in science. But on Earth here, we would be like, what? Bomb them, we don't understand. Like, I don't think it would be a peaceful thing. How about you?
Honestly, I think a first contact scenario will happen similar to Star Trek, and here's why. I don't think aliens will just invade because there has to be a reason for them just invading. Like either, like you said, they want to colonize or there's some sort of resource here that they want. But if this is an intergalactic species that's able to master and develop interstellar travel, what resource could they want here on Earth that's going to benefit them? I highly doubt that. So they just want to take over and colonize, but then the environment has to be similar to theirs, or they're going to find a way to terraform. Then you're just getting into like weird headcanon of alien invasions. But what I think will happen, and obviously it's not going to happen, I doubt it'll happen within this century given how the first quarter of it seems to have unfolded, that there's going to be some major discovery, or we're going to progress as a civilization that'll send some sort of signal out to the cosmos that we are ready to be accepted into the intergalactic fold. And it happened very similar like that on Star Trek, where humans mastered warp drive, or they developed warp drive, and that the Vulcans or whoever detected that, and then they peacefully landed on Earth and say like, hey, we're friendly, we want to share our developments with you and help your society progress even more. Personally, I think that's how it will unfold.
That is a very optimistic look at it, and I give you a lot of credit, Chris. I like that. I wish my view of it would be a little bit more optimistic, so I like that. Don't lose that hope, man.
Hey, there's very few things I can look forward to in the realm of science or science fiction. One of them is human beings landing on Mars, and maybe I live long enough to see a first contact situation on planet Earth.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Hopefully.
It would be fun to see, but I know I would be highly emotional when human beings land on Mars.
Me too. I think it would be pretty rad to see us get there and walk around and, oh my God, we did it. But
yeah, they can definitively say there are no aliens here on Mars. We've been wrong this whole time.
Yeah, right. We'll see. That's what they're saying. 2030s, 2040s, we'll get to Mars, but who the hell knows? So it's all up in the air.
Exactly. Nobody knows.
No, nobody knows.
Hopefully Elon Musk can, figure his life out and develop a ship that will take people to Mars.
Mm-hmm. We'll see. We definitely will. But cool. Now, that's cool.
All right. So, as we discussed when we were talking about the cast, this film is filled with major actors who have taken on smaller roles, less screen time. So, in a film like this, was there anybody who managed to stand out? Or, who surprised you?
Who surprised me? Jack Nicholson is always incredible. He was really good. I enjoyed the grandma? I forget her name. What was it? Sylvia Sidney? She was really
Sidney.
Yeah, she was really good. Sarah Jessica Parker and Pierce Brosnan was hilarious when his head was just like decapitated and she was on the dog. That just made me laugh so hard. And who else? I think those, and then Annette Bening? Or no? Which one played the president's wife? Was that Glenn Close?
Yeah, that was Glenn Close.
Yeah, she was so great. Like, I loved her and Jack Nicholson's relationship, how he was just so terrified of her. Like, that whole trio of Natalie Portman, Glenn Close, and Jack Nicholson, they were just so great. Such, like, their whole family. Like, I loved how Natalie Portman was the only logical person in the whole entire film. Her and then the young man. And then Jim Brown. Jim Brown was great.
I just love it when they're sitting on the couch after Congress was blown up and you hear Natalie Portman just, sarcastically say, well, I guess it wasn't the doves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was so great with her little zingers this whole film. I almost felt like she just showed up and it was like, man, whatever. Because half of her lines, she just, especially at the end with the guy giving his speech, sure, whatever, I don't care. She just played the role of the teenager, like, just perfectly.
I mean, me personally, I think Jim Brown was the underrated star of the film. Like, I would have seen this film if Jim Brown were the star and everybody else was just ancillary. Like, because this is a story I can get behind. Like, he's a former heavyweight boxing champion. He's trying to build his life, reconnect with his wife and kids, and he's going to stop at nothing to get back to them. I mean, and even goes so far as to have a fist fight with a group of Martians. I thought that was incredible and hilarious.
That was. And that was the best, because at the end, they fly away and you're like, oh, shoot, is this it? Like, did he die? And then, boom, baby, he made it back. Right at the end. He finally made it home.
Yeah, manages to go from Las Vegas to Baltimore in just under a night and gets back in time to squish a Martian's brain under his foot.
Details. It's a movie. He somehow made it in a couple hours.
Were you also surprised that most of the cast was killed off?
No, I wasn't. I think that's the difference between the 90s and big blockbuster, like big cast movies in modern times, because I feel like they don't ever kill off the cast, in movies nowadays, whereas back in the day, I think they did a little bit more, like in the 90s, in that grunge era, because the 70s, I don't think they really killed people off either. They kept the whole cast in tune, but this was great. I loved it. Jack Nicholson dying twice. I was like, no way. I was completely blown away with that. I think that's what added to why the film was so great as a shock factor, because you didn't think that they were going to do it, but they did. No one was safe. Anyone could have been murdered at any time.
Yeah, this was like science fiction Game of Thrones. Anybody could have died at any point.
Yeah, and they did. Michael J. Fox dying. I was like, no way, man. I couldn't believe it.
I was surprised, just given like how big all of these actors were at the time. Because I mean, you got Jack Nicholson dying, like you said, twice. Glenn Close, Pierce Brosnan, Martin Short getting brained, Danny DeVito. Like, there's so many big actors at the time who are just killed. They're alien fodder.
Yeah, and the only ones that really remained were the nobody actors. That's why it was so. That's why I loved how Tim Burton did it. All the big name, but that's the cool thing about it, because all the big name actors played such deplorable human beings, like Sarah Jessica Parker, Pierce Brosnan, Michael J. Fox. All of them were just like idiots and not nice people. And the only people that were left were actually the good, The kid was great.
Yeah, like
Natalie Portman, all of them were good people.
Yeah, the people that are left were the smart ones. Like Richie managed to. He did the noble thing. He was going to go save Grandma, and he survived because of it. Whereas his parents were, beaten to death in that trailer.
Yeah.
And Natalie Portman manages to hide. Pam Grier's taking care of her kids. Jim Brown, wants to get back to his family. Like the people who survived, like they did the right thing. They were smart and they hid and they just waited it out. Like even the Tom Jones gang at the end of the film, when you get the Disney Princess ending, when all the deer and the birds show up.
Yeah, that was another guy that was awesome, low key, like super unexpected, and he crushed it.
Yeah, him and Jim Brown, I always forget that they're in this
Yeah.
film, and he just shows up singing his song and is like, "There's a Martian right behind me."
Yeah, he crushed it. You gotta love Tim Burton, man. He has that wonderful shock factor that I think his films are missing nowadays. Uh, Kudos to that. I love that cast.
He, yeah, he definitely knew how to shock and entertain people all at the same time, and I think one of the more, I wouldn't say shocking, but just sort of like the one of the big gotcha moments in the film is when the Martians are allowed to enter the Chamber of Congress, and they're just all zapped and they're all killed.
All of them completely murdered the entire political faction of the United States. Isn't that nuts? That's
Well, yeah,
that begs
but
me.
by doing that, do you think that Tim Burton like takes a political stance here? Like, is he saying like, oh well, Democrats are bad or Republicans are bad, or is it just everybody's bad?
See, I was just about to ask you that same question. I don't know. So that's like my question. I think maybe he's saying it's all bad. That's why I took it as like kind of satire, where he's saying it's all bad. Like we can't handle this stuff because where we're at in society. We're too far gone. Even in 95, 96, we need to reboot with better people, or I that's what I think in a way, but I still kind of feel like he was just like poking fun at everyone. So it wasn't too heavy handed, but maybe that's why this film is great, because it's not like, I feel like if it was remade today, 25 years later, it would be very heavy handed with political theater as opposed to the more campy nature 25 years ago. How about you?
I think he splits the difference and says like, you know what, I'm making fun of everybody. Like, and no one is safe in this film. Like, blowing up Congress was absolutely hysterical, and I love Sylvia Sidney's reaction when she's watching it on TV. She's laughing hysterically, going, "They blew up Congress." That was so great, and like that doesn't exactly stir up controversy, I don't think, because I mean, at any point in history, nobody likes Congress. Everybody hates Congress. Like they have a very low approval rating. It seems like every election cycle. I mean, Republicans are portrayed as more warmongers. The Democrats and the scientists are naive. But then we also see that both of their suggestions don't work.
Yeah.
Like when Rod Steiger's general character says like, we have to launch nukes, like the Martians are able to neutralize the nukes, and in a scene that just gets me every time, they just suck up the nuclear gas like it's helium and just going like I thought that was fantastic. And then the scientists thinking it's a good idea to letting Martians in the Chamber of Congress, like, no, this is a bad idea too. Like, you cannot. And then Jack Nicholson is like, I hope we can able to find a peaceful resolution. Like, no, they just killed a bunch of people and you want to make peace with them? Like, nothing works here.
It's so stupid. Oh, I love it. It's so great. It really is. He just nailed it on the head. That's why this film is so entertaining.
Yeah, and I think and another strength of Tim Burton's films is that nobody is safe during his films. He makes fun of everybody. Everybody is made fun of. Even during his Batman films, like he even makes fun of Batman for trusting Catwoman and allowing himself to be taken in and ultimately stabbed in the chest by her. Like nobody is safe in a Tim Burton film. You are going to get some sort of, maybe not an insult, you're going to get some jab that's thrown at you if you're in a Tim Burton film.
Always. Well, he doesn't care. He plays both sides, which is really nice,
Yeah, but I do want to briefly talk about like what do you think of Jack Nicholson as president in this film? Like if James Dale existed and he was running as a politician and he looked like Jack Nicholson, do you think you'd vote for James Dale to be president without knowing his political affiliation?
I don't know. I would have to know what he stands for. I'm sorry. But Jack Nicholson as a president was pretty funny. And No, I wouldn't vote for Jack Nicholson. Just the way that he reacted to all of this stuff. No, I would not vote for Jack Nicholson.
I like the fact that Jack Nicholson, if he were president, could summon like this sort of like anger and darkness and fear
Yeah.
that I think you need to invoke in times as president. Like sometimes you have to be like the disapproving dad. It's just like, I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed.
I'm just disappointed. Yes, that is true. And I always loved like the little speech that he gives at the end to the Martians, trying to convince them to not kill him and to like be friends. It's so great because it's just Jack being Jack, and he's such a freaking great actor. I love it. Even the Martians start applauding him, but then they just murder him because they don't care. That's why, oh, it's so great.
But where do you think Jack Nicholson is / James Dale ranks in terms of fictional presidents? Because there's been a litany of fictional presidents that we've seen in Hollywood. So where do you think he ranks?
Oh, for in this movie, I would say for president.
Just like in the pantheon of fictional presidents that we've seen, across time, where does he rank in sort of like near the top, or does he rank near the bottom?
I would say he ranks near the top. I mean, obviously, you can never beat, like, I think Harrison Ford is great as the president. But I think I loved Jack Nicholson in this just because of how he owned it. Even though I didn't agree with how he responded, I thought it was great. So I would vote him near the top, definitely.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I think Harrison Ford's president from Air Force One is the best that's ever existed, just for the sheer fact of him yelling at Gary Oldman, "Get off my plane."
I
love that so much.
Yes. God, that's one of the best lines. Do you know if Morgan Freeman was ever a president in the film? Because I would rank him if he ever was.
Yeah, he was in president in one of the Gerard Butler, Olympus Has Fallen movies. I forget. I think it was Angel Has Fallen. He was president in that one, but I haven't seen that one. But I mean, yeah, Morgan Freeman would be a great fictional president.
Yes, he just has that voice where if he ever gave an address, you'd be like, all right, I believe this man. Much like Barack Obama. It's like, yes, I trust
just remembered
you.
Morgan Freeman was president in Deep Impact. I almost forgot about
Oh,
that.
that's right. Yes. I liked him in that. Yeah, there's a certain amount of people where you're just like, yes, I would love this person to be the prez in the movies.
Yeah, I would say Morgan Freeman, Jack Nicholson, Harrison Ford. Don't forget Bill Pullman from Independence Day. Great on-screen presidents.
That's right. Yes. This is our Independence Day. That speech is so epic every time.
All right, so what bothered you in this film, Sean? What was your lens flare?
What bothered me in this film? Honestly, nothing crazy stood out to me as like a technical error or anything like that. The stupidity was very engaging and hilarious. I think the things that bothered me were just the people. Like our main character, like I can't even remember his name. Jack Nicholson's parents, or Jack Black, his parents. I couldn't stand them, and so I was very happy when those like trailer people ended up getting squished. I just couldn't stand their disrespect for their son. We wish you died instead of him. I was like, man, you guys could just go. Like, no.
Well, even his girlfriend, like 2 days after Jack Black is murdered on national television, she's in bed with another dude. Like, come on, like have some respect.
I know, like there's no mourning there. So I couldn't stand those people. And then obviously, they always have to murder doves, to show that they're aliens. So I would say like those things. But that would be more like my red shirt is the dove that got murdered. How about you?
I actually pointed this out when I was watching it. Like I have to go with the Martians invading the nursing home and killing the residents as my lens flare. Because I mean, you see you see a red skeleton running down in a wheelchair, and to me it just seems like it's punching down for the Martians. They have all this advanced weaponry and technology, and they choose like, no, we're going to invade the nursing home and kill everybody there. Like, they can't fight back. That's punching down. You don't punch down.
They don't care. They just want to murder everyone.
I mean, but without that lens flare, we don't get the gag of playing Slim Whitman on the radio and having it just hit the right frequency and explodes Martian brains.
Yeah, they couldn't stand. Was it the frequency, or it was like loud enough and the music was terrible?
I don't know. Maybe it's just the dulcet, yodeling of Slim Whitman that just, struck the right chord in the Martian brains and just blew them up.
We can't handle this. That's funny. I like it.
Or the other lens flare I had would be the opening of the film where you just see the herd of cows running down the road and they're all on fire. Like you mentioned, like it's not an alien film without, some sort of innocent animal being killed.
Always. That's the show of force. We got to go after the innocents. It's not fair.
And I legit forgot about that opening. I did not even remember all the cows being on fire as being in the film, and seeing it again after all this time, like, oh, this is in the movie. Okay, this is dark.
Yeah, very much so. That it definitely sets the tone for the entire film.
Well, that's what bothered us. But do you want to hear the latest? What bothered the internet?
Sure.
The latest edition of This Week in Toxic Fandom.
Go for it.
Oh man, I found one because it didn't have anything to do with the Martians, but it had to do with Pam Grier's character, Louise Williams. She was a bus driver. So, from IMDb, the bus driver Louise Williams sees her kids Cedric and Neville in a games arcade and says to her passengers, "Excuse me, folks, but we've got to make an unscheduled stop. It takes about 4 seconds between braking and stopping. At 30 miles per hour, that would have taken about 120 feet, yet she manages to stop the bus at the arcade about 10 feet after she first saw the kids." So just people quibbling. It's like you had to voice it on the internet. Maybe it's just a movie. Maybe for dramatic effect, you put the bus back in front of the arcade and she drags the kids and puts them on the bus.
What the frick? Why? And how do they know the feet? Like, what did they calculate that before? It's impossible. 10 feet. Oh, it's 120 feet. Like, it's a movie. It's a movie, folks.
Who cares when the bus stopped? Who cares? Nobody does.
It's crazy because, like, that was the thing, Like, out of all the stuff, the movie was crazy up until then anyways. It already, like, started off as, like, this is what we are, man. But that was the bus. The bus was the thing that got him. That's crazy.
Oh, man. So... Did you have a red shirt, Sean? There's so many to choose from in this film, but did you have one that you felt super bad for?
One that I felt super bad for? No, I think everyone that died deserved to die. Other than the cows and the dove, the poor animals, because it's never fair to see animals getting attacked. I don't like that. So, no, but the humans, I did not care. I was like, you guys can die. That's fine. How about you?
Again, but there's just so many to choose from. You have Buster the first dog. You had Danny DeVito's character, who's he's credited as the rude gambler. His character doesn't even have a name. But I have to say, my red shirt for Mars Attacks would have to be the Secret Service agent Mitch. Granted,
Mitch,
not great at his job, but he's loyal and he was killed in the war room, and he seemed to be pretty good. At some points, he was able to save the president when the Martian had him hostage, but he allowed Jerry, Martin Short's character, the press secretary, to bring a complete stranger into the White House for the purposes of sex.
I know.
Like, why would you let him bring somebody into the White House who doesn't have the right clearance. And again, this was during the time when you could visit the White House and you didn't have to win some sort of championship trophy to get an invitation.
Oh,
Like, you could just show up at the White House and say, I want a tour. And
oh, that's crazy.
but even still, like, this is probably like midnight, 1 a.m. or something, and you're on duty and you see the press secretary bring what is obviously a hooker or somebody in disguise through the front door. Why wouldn't they say, no, you can't bring that person in here?
God. Dude, Martin Short's character was so deplorable. I was so happy for him to die. I couldn't wait for him to die.
Yeah, I did not feel bad when he got hit in the head with that statue. I'm like, yeah, you had that coming. You were a dingus.
Yeah, it's okay if those people aren't left on the planet. No loss.
Exactly.
No loss.
So what do you say we now discuss the legacy that was Mars Attacks?
Okay. I'm down.
Okay, so after all the expenses, the film's production budget was $70 million.
All right.
And for marketing, it was about $100 million. However, Mars Attacks only grossed $101 million at the box office, so it was not a success at the time.
No, not really.
And because I like doing this, it came out December 13th, 1996. That was also the same day that Jerry Maguire came out, and Jerry Maguire was a huge film, nominated for a couple of Academy Awards. Cuba Gooding Jr. won an Oscar for that film. So, but like Sean mentioned earlier in the show, a little film. I think you've heard of this, Sean. Independence Day came out in 1996. Probably one of the best alien invasion films that's ever come out.
Mm-hmm.
And so many people actually thought that Mars Attacks was a spoof of Independence Day.
Really?
And that, yeah, there were so many people who didn't see this and thought, oh, Mars Attacks, isn't that just a ripoff of Independence Day? And this is the problem with releasing films with similar premises really close to each other, is people get confused. And thankfully, Independence Day was a massive film at the time, made up its budget. It's still held up as one of the best science fiction films. But it is just, I think the success of Independence Day really kind of tanked the chances of Mars Attacks being a successful film.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there. I definitely think so. It was just kind of one of those things where people saw it and they're like, oh, we've already seen this. You know, why are we going to watch this again? But they're so like different, you know, there's like a stark contrast between the two. So I feel like the people that wanted to see it, it's either you love or hate, you know?
I mean, it did find success in Europe, but even Tim Burton went on to say he tried to defend releasing the film in 1996, but I think he said, quote, it almost seemed like we had done kind of a Mad Magazine version of Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
So that was his quote after the film came out. And it's very rare that this happens too, but when the film was still in theaters, TBS actually purchased the broadcasting rights of the film. So
Really?
I think the studio realized that they weren't going to be making a lot of money and just said, like, you know what, forget it. We're selling the broadcast rights right now.
It's over. We're done. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, it's very rare that it happens while a film is still in theaters, but I think they saw the writing on the wall when the box office numbers were coming back.
Yeah, I know. But it's still, that's crazy. It still made like 30 million, so I'm sure they made their budget back. At least some of it.
It made some money, but again, when you only make $101 million during your theatrical run and you spent $100 million to make this film, nobody's making a ton of money.
No. That's true.
Well, it didn't help that the critical reception at the time wasn't great. I mean, now, internet reviews, it's got a 54% on Rotten Tomatoes, 52 on Metacritic. It's got a B on CinemaScore.
Mm-hmm.
So, it just at the time, there's just so many people who just mock the film. Like, there was a reviewer for the Los Angeles Times. called even this review references Independence Day, just saying like it mocks the conventions that Independence Day takes so seriously, and it said that in truth Mars Attacks is not as fun as it should be. It's like, well, I kind of have to disagree with that.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it can be fun, you just can't take the film too seriously.
No, you just have to take it for what it is, and it's not something that's going to be earth-shattering or anything. It's a film, and it's a silly film, and it's not, if you want to spend some time and laugh, watch it.
So, also, no Oscar nominations. It was shortlisted for Best Visual Effects, but I think that award ended up going to Independence Day.
Yeah.
But nominated for a ton of Saturn Awards. Danny Elfman won Best Music, but also nominated for Best Performance by a Younger Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, Best Costumes, Best Special Effects, Best Sci-Fi Film, and so, yeah. Big time nominations at the Saturn Awards.
Yeah. So it and that's good because it should with the Saturns, absolutely.
So, I mean, let me ask you this too. I mean, do you think that Mars Attacks has managed to ascend to cult status? I mean, we're far enough removed from the release of it. I think there's still a solid appreciation for the film, but do you think it has become sort of the cult classic that maybe it was accidentally intended for it to be?
I don't know. Because I haven't heard many people talk about it, to be honest with you. Like where I'm at now, I know some of one of the nurses, we were talking and I did like podcasts and she's like, oh yeah, Mars Attacks. I remember seeing that in the 90s. She's like, you either love it or hate it. And that's how I felt about it as well. But I don't know many people that are like, what? Mars Attacks? I saw that, So I think maybe there's a pocket out there. I haven't investigated on Reddit if, it's like a cult status. I think it could be a pretty good cult following movie. Definitely. If it got like a bunch of traction, absolutely. This is total cult status film. What do you think?
I mean, I would hope that it does ascend into cult status soon, but I think the time is sort of running out for this film to be considered a cult classic. I think The Thing was able to find new life 20 years after the release and is now the classic we revere it to be. But I think the window is fastly closing on Mars Attacks for it to be recognized as this great spoof, satire, parody, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
I would hope that people begin to recognize it soon and is able to find new life for people.
I agree with you there.
So, with all of that in mind, let's rate Mars Attacks, Sean.
I'm down.
All right. So, on our unique scale on the Force-Fed the Sci-Fi podcast of wouldn't watch, would watch, would own, and would host a viewing party, what do you give Mars Attacks?
All right. What would I give Mars Attacks? For me, I would rate this film as a... I would put this as a would own. I don't think it's a perfect film at all, but to me, it's pretty entertaining. And I got a lot of the jokes. I enjoyed the CGI, the sheer campiness of it all. To me, the satire on everything. And it's just a nice pocket of the 90s, for the pop culture at the time. And to me, a nice, good little critique of human nature and how we are and like as a species and everything. And plus the Martians are just hilarious. Like that, their voice, the way they just brutally murder people. It's really just like a fun movie to me that I really enjoyed. So I would put this as a would own. Absolutely. I think it's something that people should watch if they, if you enjoy like cheesy sci-fi and it's not in a way cheesy like it's from the 60s and 50s, but it's a good throwback piece and an homage to them. So I definitely think people should check it out. How about you?
I would have to say if there is one thing that Mars Attacks truly excels at, it's that it doesn't take itself too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
There's in spite of the seriousness that's shown on screen, we interpret it to be funny and humorous, and I think a lot of that is owed to the great comedic performances from like people you wouldn't expect to be as funny, like Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Pierce Brosnan. Like they dole out some truly great comedic performances and timing, and even the visual effects still look great after all this time. Granted, this is still in the early days of computer generated images for film, but I think this is still one of the great early examples of how that can be used as a tool to enhance the film, because this would have looked entirely different and we wouldn't be able to buy into it if it were stop motion animation that like what was originally envisioned. And like we discussed earlier, there's no big message here politically. It makes fun of both sides and everybody. It's just comic alien destruction and mayhem, and for that reason I would have to call this a would host a viewing party.
Oh, there you go. Cool. I like that.
Yeah, you know, as much as I dig the film, I think this is something that a lot of people can enjoy. And like I said, you cannot take this film too seriously. Like you have to go in with the right mindset, similar to like if you were going to watch Starship Troopers. You know that's going to be a satire film. You have to know that going into it. And same thing with this. You have to know that this isn't going to be some serious alien invasion film. This is sort of like a time capsule. This is an homage to the great science fiction films from the 1950s. And I think now we're far enough removed to be able to appreciate that, but I don't think people were ready for that in 1996, fresh off the heels of a film like Independence Day.
No, I agree with you fully. Absolutely. Well, good stuff, man. Good stuff. That's Mars Attacks. So now it's time to pick our next movie.
Absolutely. We're going to enlist the help of our random number generator AI, Major Samantha, to help us pick our next film from our list of 118 films that we keep in reserve for the show. And from that list, she has selected number 17, or high up in the list here. It's a film from 2011, directed by Rupert Wyatt, and starring James Franco. It is Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Sweet. I'm down to check that one out. We are
diving into our first foray into the Planet of the Apes franchise, at least a reboot franchise. So I'm excited to rewatch this one, I got to tell you.
Same. It's been years since I've seen it, so this is going to be good. Hopefully.
Awesome. So that'll be our film in the main feed for next time. We've got a lot of exciting bonus episodes coming up here soon in the feed. We're going to be doing A Quiet Place 2. We got Mortal Kombat that we're still working on, and a lot of great releases that are coming here in the summer of 2021. So be on the lookout for those. And if you enjoyed today's show, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. That really is the best place to do it. Say what you want. Tell us what your favorite sandwich is or what your favorite Tim Burton movie is. And as please rate and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts. And if you want more show notes and links to all of our social media, head on over to our website, forcefedsci-fi.com. And so for all of us at the Force Fed Sci-Fi team, myself and Sean Culp, we will see you next time.